Hi, everybody. I see everybody jumping on. I'll give you a minute or so and see how many we can gather before we get cooking. Hope everybody's having a great day, enjoying their summer. We are at the end of June. Hard to believe already. Me, I like the warmth and the heat, so I'm in my happy place. Let's see, how are we doing? All right. Y'all didn't hesitate jumping on, so I'm going to get started because I know we have a great presentation coming. First off, welcome to the 2022 Harmony webinar series. My name is Christy Weeks, and I am the Brand and Digital Media Manager for Harmony Foundation and your host for today. Our presentation today is the impact of minority stress and adverse childhood experiences on the mental health and substance use of LGBTQ+ identified individuals. Our presenter is Todd Kennedy from Pride Institute, and I'm so grateful he's here today. So before we get started with the presentation, I'm going to run through a few things regarding Harmony. First off, we are a 43-acre campus up in the Rocky Mountains. We are residential rehab, and we have been in business for over 50 years. So we've been treating adults and their family members for quite some time. We believe that there is the opportunity for long-term recovery from alcohol and other drugs, and we have fostered a generation of long-term recovery, supporting our clients and their families for a lifetime. We are a 70-bed residential program up in the mountains, and we are 12-step program and gender responsive. So if you want to learn more about Harmony, since I did not do such a great job reading my cue card here today, which you all can see, please check out our website at www.harmonyfoundationinc.com, or if you have any questions, you can reach out to our admissions staff at 866-686-7867. Let's see, I see people jumping on. Hi, everybody. So good to see you again. Let's get going. So housekeeping issues, we do record these webinars and it will be available on our website by the end of the week. At that time, it is no longer eligible for a CEU, but it is free for anybody's viewing. We do keep track of the time that everybody's involved. That's how we track our CEU. So you must be actively involved for 45 minutes. I will be sending out certificates by the end of day on Friday, July 1st, for those of you who are 45 minutes and up. If you have to jump off for some reason and you would like a certificate of attendance, just shoot me an email at cweeks@harmonyfoundationinc.com. I'll be happy to oblige you. Again, please check your junk emails after Friday the 1st, because a lot of times my emails will end up in your junk folder with your certificate and all the additional wonderful information that we put in there, which this week will include Todd's wonderful presentation. So all of you who are getting ready to ask me if the slide deck is going to be available, it's going to be available, and I will include it in with your CEU. So as I mentioned, this amazing presentation is presented by Todd Kennedy, and he is with the Pride Institute. He has been employed with them in various roles since 2006, and in his current role as Director of Clinical Services since 2012. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree in Addiction Counseling from Metropolitan State University and his Master's degree in Counseling Psychology from St. Mary's University. He is certified to provide supervision to alcohol and drug counselors and licensed professional clinical counselors through the Board of Behavioral Health and Therapy of Minnesota. Todd is active on the conference circuit presenting on the substance use and mental health issues of the LGBTQIA+ community, including the Cape Cod Symposium on Addictive Disorders, the Moments of Change Conference, and the Finding Freedom Symposium. Todd serves on the board of directors for the National Association of LGBTQ Addiction Professionals and their allies, and the Minnesota Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Council. Todd was privileged to receive the 2022 Clinical Supervisor of the Year Award from the Minnesota Association of Resources for Recovery and Chemical Health. Congratulations on that, by the way. That is amazing. So with all that being said, We are very grateful for our partnership with the Pride Institute. And if you want to learn more about them, please check them out on their website. And I'm going to turn this over to Todd so he can get on with all his details. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I will be watching the chat box and let him know as questions pop up so we can answer them along the way. So with that being said, here we go.
All right.
It's all you, Todd.
Thank you. I will share my screen here. Starting from the beginning.
Yes.
So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to the Harmony Foundation and to Christy. You have been so welcoming and so helpful. I really appreciate all you've done. My name is Todd Kennedy. I am the Director of Clinical Services with Pride Institute, and I use he, him, his pronouns. It really is a privilege to be here today, and I look forward to spending the next 45, 50 minutes with you. As Christy mentioned, you can ask questions as we go along. A couple of things about myself. I'm pretty informal during presentations, and I would prefer that we interact and that we learn from each other. As Christy mentioned, I've been at Pride Institute for the past 15 years in my current role since 2012. A little bit about Pride Institute. Pride Institute was founded in 1986 in response to the HIV/AIDS crisis at that time. It was a place for gay, bi, men, and lesbians to address their substance use and mental health issues. And for many, it was also an opportunity to start addressing end-of-life issues. Over the course of its history, it's somewhat transformed into being a residential, partial hospitalization, and intensive outpatient program specifically for the LGBTQ plus community. Before I jump into the actual presentation, I want to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of you that work in this field. As you know, our lives have changed, particularly since 2016, and we have seen marginalized communities, in peril. We have, prior to a couple of years ago, I used to say that my presentations weren't political, because I was always worried about ruffling feathers, but let's face it, this is all political. And so it's been a rough 6 years for many of our marginalized communities, including the LGBTQ plus community. I'm sure you've seen this in your practice and treatment centers and clinics. The acuity of mental health issues and substance use has increased drastically within many, not just marginalized communities, but people in general. So I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for the work that you do, and also for taking time to look at a marginalized community such as the LGBTQ plus community. As I mentioned, I'm Todd. I use he, him as pronouns. I am a part of the community. I identify as a pansexual, cisgender, white male of a certain age, socioeconomic status, and abilities. And we're going to jump right into our presentation now. First of all, happy Pride to all of you. This is a Pride booth from last Sunday. We have our therapy dog Dash in the upper right-hand center. And we also were fortunate this year to march in the parade that we see in the left-hand corner. I wanted to share this picture because our CEO, Terry Hayden, is in the middle of this picture. She's a fabulous human being that has really helped Pride to move into the 21st century and to provide services that serve not just LGBTQ people, but LGBTQ individuals of all identities, including their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. So our goals today. Typically, I don't like to make any assumptions about what people know about the community, and I'll spend a lot of time in the beginning on basic terminology. And so again, I'm not making any assumptions about what people know or don't know, but I did want to streamline a little bit of this so we could get sort of into the meat and potatoes of things. And so our goals today are going to be review specific terminology, We're going to look at what it means to be gender expansive versus gender non-binary or transgender. For those individuals that are choosing to transition, we're going to look at the different and various stages of transition. I'm going to share an LGBTQ plus affirming assessment that ensures that we capture all relevant information to an LGBTQ identified individual. We are going to look at minority stress and adverse childhood experiences to see the impact on the substance use and mental health issues of the community. And I'm also going to share a study done by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, on the substance use and mental health of LGBTQ individuals. This study does not include trans individuals. So from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, they come up with this quote, and I don't think this is shocking to anyone, but people who identify as LGBTQ plus often face social stigma, discrimination, and other challenges that may not be encountered by people who identify as heterosexual. These individuals also face a greater risk of harassment, violence, discrimination, and oppression. As a result of these and other stressors, sexual minorities are at increased risk for various behavioral health issues. And this speaks, so succinctly to minority stress as well. And so we will be exploring that a little bit later in our presentation. I want to share these statistics, not to pathologize or to marginalize the community at all, but this is the reality of the 21st century. And this still is occurring today. In 2021, over 475 trans individuals worldwide were murdered. 60% of those individuals, it was through domestic partner or intimate partner violence. But those are staggering numbers considering the number of trans individuals in the world. And so I do like to start out with some statistics as we see, and these are from the National Transgender Discrimination Survey and the PAC survey results and experiences in healthcare, housing, and education. Upper left-hand corner, among trans individuals of color, 68% of them versus 27% of white trans individuals have reported being discriminated against by their healthcare provider. For all individuals, 50% have had to educate their own provider on competent care. 90% have been threatened or harassed at work. In the upper right-hand corner, we see that almost 40% of LGBTQ people of color report avoiding public spaces due to the fear of discrimination. In comparison, 32% of white LGBTQ individuals reported the same. LGBTQ individuals, particularly our trans population, are 4 times more likely to live in extreme poverty. Up to 70% have reported harassment by law enforcement officials. Our trans individuals of color experience 4 times the rate of HIV infection compared to the general population. We see that suicide attempts in the population reports are up to 41% have attempted compared to 1.6% of the general population. Of course, there's higher rates of smoking within the population. And we see that 43% or more report using substances to cope with the stress of oppression and discrimination. And as we know, and research and studies have shown, LGBTQ plus individuals experience higher rates of substance use and mental health issues. I do like to share the study from the Wilder Research Institute because it really speaks to LGBTQ individuals of color, including our BIPOC and AAPI populations. So this study came out in 2020, but it was done in 2018. As you see, 4% of Minnesotans identify as LGBTQ plus. Of those, 11% of those that are homeless identify as LGBTQ. What I really like to note, and which is staggering if you look near the bottom, we see that 68% of those that are homeless that are part of the LGBTQ plus community are African American, Native American, Hispanic, multiracial, or Asian. I think this is so important to see and to look at and to discuss, in that I know at Pride Institute, a big movement now is diversity, equity, inclusion. And we need to do, Pride needs to do better with our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and Asian American Pacific Islanders. And so sometimes it includes having very difficult conversations, but in this presentation, I have tried to really bring in the experience of, BIPOC and AAPI individuals. So being that we work in the field, I wanted to share the American Psychological Association standards of care as it pertains to LGBTQ plus individuals, sort of to build that foundation of the work that we do with the community. So we understand that gender is a non-binary construct that allows for a range of identity, and that a person's gender identity may not align with the sex assigned at birth. So it's been really wonderful to see over the last 10 years and to see the research that is being done and helping people move from the idea of a binary concept of looking at gender between male and female, and to understand that gender is a construct unto itself with multiple and many gender identities. I'd like to believe that as many individuals that there are in the world, that is the number of gender identities that we do have in the world. And of course, it speaks to individuals who at birth, their assigned sex at birth is male or female, and as they grow, develop, they come to understand that their physical body does not align or is incongruent with their internal or psychological sense of self. We also understand that gender identity and sexual orientation are distinct but interrelated. And I think this is really an important piece, and something I need to be cognizant of in all the work that I do. We are aware of how our attitudes, our biases, and knowledge of gender identity and gender expression may affect how we provide care to individuals. As we always say, we must do our own work. We must, through supervision and consultation, ensure that we bring any biases or underlying issues that we may possess to others so that we can explore what that is about. So some terms I'm going to go through quickly. If I'm speaking too fast, let Christy know and she can tell me to slow down. But some basic terms, I didn't provide slides for all the basic terms, but for gay, basically men that have the need, or identified men that seek connection, warmth, understanding with other identified men, may or may not include sexual behaviors. Lesbian is a woman who seeks connection, or an identified woman seeking connection, connection, warmth, and other things from another identified female, and that may or may not include sexual behaviors. Same with bi individuals. They seek warmth, connection to other bi individuals. That may be a male, it may be female, and may or may not include sexual contact. We have asexual individuals who do not experience the drive to engage in sexual behaviors, or they're not interested in sexual behaviors. This is different than celibacy, and that celibacy is usually chosen by an individual to engage in, oftentimes for religious or spiritual reasons. Cisgender, cis is Latin for on the same side. So a cisgender individual is an individual whose sex assigned at birth aligns or is congruent with their internal or psychological sense of self. Transgender, trans, Latin for across from, is to identify individuals whose physical body or it does not align with their internal or psychological sense of self. And yes.
Got a quick question.
Yes.
Can you define TGNC?
Transgender nonconforming.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Yes, transgender.
No worries.
All right. And then we have two-spirited individuals. Two-spirit individuals are members of First Nation Native American tribes. They're revered within those nations. They also They oftentimes are considered third gender individuals. Two-spirit can pertain to someone's sexual orientation, gender identity, or both. And we're very fortunate at Pride Institute that, probably about 5% of the individuals we serve are Native American. So it's really wonderful for those that identify as two-spirit to provide programming and the opportunity to honor and respect their culture. Yes, Christy.
Okay, so we have a question.
Yes.
Says she was recently in a course indicating that young people of color, particularly Black or Native, get into treatment later because their actions and behaviors are attributed to other conditions, racial biases. Do we have data that is also true for the LGBTQ plus youth as well?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are youth, because of their behaviors, not accessing treatment, or
It seems that they're getting into, is it true for the LGBTQ plus community that they're getting into treatment later because of these biases?
Absolutely. Just the access to resources, the access to resources that are competent, or at least have the ability to serve individuals. And, and there are some programs that it's not safe for individuals to access because the work hasn't been done to provide a safe space for all individuals. So yes, for some individuals, that definitely applies. Great question.
Thank you.
Yes. So assigned sex, assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. Basically, the provider looks at the genitalia of the baby that is born and announces the individual as male or female. And as we know, as individuals develop, it is the case that their physical body does not match their internal and psychological sense of self. Gender expression and presentation is how an individual presents to the world. Oftentimes it is assumptions made by other people of other people's expression and presentation that people misgender individuals, make assumptions about how they identify, and also experience a greater amount of oppression and discrimination based on assumptions about the presentation. Sexual orientation is about who an individual is attracted to. As we know with sexual orientation, that does not always is not based on sexual behaviors. Within the world, there are individuals, men who have sex with men, women who have sex with women, who engaging in same-sex activity does not indicate their sexual orientation. For some cultures, it's considered down low, or it might just be an expression and a need to have a physical release, or it could be someone using their body to barter, for substances or a place to stay, or for other goods. Queer. So I remember growing up, queer was a pejorative, and it was really a way to really be a derogatory term towards another individual. I would caution everyone in using the word queer. Many in previous generations still find the term offensive. The best practice is really, if the client identifies to you that they identify as queer, then use queer. And again, that is the best practice, is if you don't know how someone identifies, is to ask them how they identify. Gender expansive. So at one time, transgender was that umbrella term for people that transgress society's expectations of what gender is. A new term that has recently evolved, and I really appreciate it, is gender expansive. And under gender expansive, we include transgender individuals. Gender expansive, as it denotes in the label, it really is it's for individuals who don't follow society's indication what the stereotypical way a man or a woman should express themselves. It truly is an individual that is uniquely themselves. they use clothing, makeup, affectation, emotional expression, whatever the case may be, to express themselves. And this can sometimes be gender nonconforming, gender non-binary, gender queer, transgender, but I love the idea of gender expansive because it is the umbrella that includes all people and all genders. I do thank the current generation because they understand that words, and labels help represent to other people and to express to other people our ideas. And we all want to be represented in society and to be understood. And so a slew of new words have come forward. And I'll be honest, I have a hard time keeping up with all of the terminology. But here are some of the more recent ones that I wanted to quickly share with you. Non-binary, an individual that falls outside of the traditional binary. But let's get out of thinking about gender as binary. Gender fluid, someone whose gender is not fixed. One day they may feel more masculine, another more feminine, other days outside of that spectrum. Genderqueer, again, another term for someone that falls outside of the gender binary. Then we have pan, bi, agender. A couple other ones to denote. Achillean also stands for men that have sex with men. Demisexual, those are individuals that don't really experience the need to have sexual activity unless they find that they're emotionally connected to individuals. Pansexual individual, I identify as pansexual. I'm attracted to human beings regardless of their gender. And then again, two-spirit, we already talked about this two-spirit individual, but just some terms to be aware of that may become more commonplace. A host of flags. These are not all the flags within the community. I did want to let you know at the end of the presentation, you will have my email. So if you'd like a copy of this presentation, I'm very happy to share it with you. So in an LGBTQ plus affirming assessment, of course, we want to have all the things that we always have in assessment, but we also want to make sure that we have space for clients who have a legal name, but also have a chosen name. And it can be difficult sometimes, but yes, we have to use the legal name for funding purposes, etc. But we can always have the chosen name underneath the legal name. And we don't have to always let clients see documents that have their legal name. Can be very violating to a client when they do see their legal name, especially when they've articulated and have asked that a chosen name be used. So make sure you have space for that. We do want to take a look at the coming out history. When did the client first have an awareness that they were LGBTQ plus? And, what was their first experience like when they came out to an individual, maybe shared that they were part of the community? As we know, oftentimes that preliminary or that primary experience can sort of shape the individual and how they come out to other individuals. And so if they've had a traumatic experience in coming out, they may be very reserved, very fearful of talking about that history or talking about their identity. So we, again, want to get a sense of what that was like for them. We also want to understand where they are in that coming out process. Do they live openly as an LGBTQ individual? And if they don't, what are some of the barriers to that? Eventually, part of the work that we have clients do here, if they want to come out, if they're not out, is really looking at the pros and cons of that, also creating a safety plan, also what are the strategies if it goes bad, etc. So we really want to have a specific plan as we move into treatment with that client if they're going to be coming out. We want to take a look at that intersectionality of identities, not only the LGBTQ piece, but the race, the ethnicity, the culture that they grew up in, any spiritual religious practices, how important was culture within their home life, what were the disciplinary practices, etc. We serve quite a lot of Somali clients here at Pride Institute, and for them to even talk about LGBTQ with family members would be, to basically be disowned by their family. So really getting an understanding of that picture for them. And then we look at related issues, and what we're going to be talking about is that minority stress. What has been the impact and the experience of potential bullying, discrimination, oppression, and what is the experience of an individual internalizing those experiences into what we call internalized homo, bi, trans, queer, lesbo negativity, basically taking those shameful messages from society, family system, educational systems, etc., and turning them inward, feeling invalidated, less than, and carrying a great weight of shame. For individuals that are trans, gender fluid, non-binary, is there a transitional process happening? Please note that not all individuals that identify as trans want to transition. For some individuals, it's just enough to be able to live authentically in the world and to be, number one, presented in the world as they are, and to feel safe in the world. And then part of the process is to, besides the mental health and all the substance use, all the other pieces, is to complete the adverse childhood experiences screening. We'll be talking about that in a minute. And that is really important because research is coming out and really demonstrating that LGBTQ plus individuals have higher experiences of adverse childhood experiences. And what is the impact of that on their substance use, their mental health, and the development of trauma or PTSD, and development of the body and brain. I do like to talk about gender dysphoria at all times, just because I think it's really important, as as clinicians that working in the field. The DSM-4TR had gender identity disorder, and that really spoke to a mental health issue of the client and not the impact of society, family systems, educational systems, etc. The messaging of trans and the discrimination and oppression that the individuals experiences because of society. So gender dysphoria, as we know, is that stress, that incongruence, that worry, that sense of hopelessness, all those internal experiences an individual has due to, one, oppression, discrimination, and two, the physical body being incongruent with the internal psychological sense of self. As we see here on the slide, gender expansive individuals typically do not experience gender dysphoria. Their dysphoria is mainly because of the stress of society. Trans individuals have not only the stress and oppression from society, but also that incongruence that they have from the physical body being incongruent with the internal psychological sense of self. So those that do choose to transition, there are different stages of transition. At Pride Institute, for the most part, we see individuals in the social transition. What this includes, maybe doing a legal name change or legally changing the identification on the driver's license. It may include coming out to family and friends. It can include, for those that are maybe trans male to female or trans female to male, exploring with makeup, how they dress, affectations, things like that. It is transforming when an individual has an aha moment. Here at Pride Institute, during my years with Pride, when it clicks with them that their gender identity has been like a core issue for them. And so we're very fortunate at Pride that we do have, clothing and things like that we could offer clients to explore that gender identity or the trans identity. Another stage is puberty blockers. This is very controversial. I'm not here to condone or condemn, but I do want to share information about it. So puberty blockers are just as they state. They prevent the individual from going through puberty. It has to be done under a physician's care. As we know, in some states, such as Texas, they are attempting to, report parents of trans individuals to authorities and have them arrested if a parent allows their child to utilize puberty blockers. And so again, it stops the individual from going through puberty, and the purpose for that is to allow the individual, the family, the support systems, including the educational system, perhaps spiritual systems, whatever systems are involved, to really come up with a plan around a transition and to give that individual client time to really understand what that identity means to them. Gender affirming hormonal transition. We have estradiol and spironolactone for individuals going from female to male. We have testosterone for those transitioning from female to male. At Pride Institute, our practice here is if people are on hormones, we continue with that. If people come in and want to be prescribed hormones, we give them some time to get through substance use withdrawal and to ensure that we have a baseline of their mental health. The reason for that is that oftentimes hormones can lead to increased emotional ability. So if you put hormones on top of substance use withdrawal, plus perhaps untreated mental health issues, it can really be overwhelming and difficult for the client. So we want to wait until the client, gets through that withdrawal, has stable mental health. And if that doesn't happen during the treatment process, we have many clinics that we work with to set clients up for an immediate appointment for hormones. And of course, lastly, we have gender affirming surgeries, including feminization and masculinization surgeries. To me, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The issue I find with much of this is that, again, individuals oftentimes have to have permission from a mental health therapist or psychiatrist or medical doctor. And if they've demonstrated a history of substance use or mental health issues, they have to have a period of time where they have 6 months or a year without the use of substances or stable mental health. And this has to be documented recovery and healing for both substance use and mental health by 1 to 3 providers in order to move forward in a gender affirming surgery. So Gender Unicorn, if you're not familiar with this, and Christy, I'm going to ask you to let me know when we're at about 10:02. Sometimes I go on a little bit too much and I don't have my clock in front of me, so thank you.
You got it.
Thank you. Gender Unicorn, there's different versions of of this illustration. There's been the gender bear, the gender bread person. What I like about the Gender Unicorn is that it gives space and a spectrum for each different identity. So if we look at gender identity, female, woman, girl, so they each have their own identity. Male, man, or boy, again, another identity, and then all other genders. This way, this really helps get out of help illustrate gender as a non-binary construct. The same with gender expression. And of course, we look at who people are physically attracted to and emotionally attracted to. Pronouns are so important, and the number one way that we can honor an individual's identity is to use the pronoun that they have asked for us to use with them. Again, we never want to make assumptions. We don't know if someone's pronouns just by how they appear to us. The proper procedure is to ask them what is their pronoun and to make sure that we have space for that on all our forms and documentations. If you do make a mistake with someone's pronoun, immediately apologize and ensure that you will do better. Research has demonstrated that the use of a proper pronoun with a trans individual helps decrease anxiety by 25%. Some agencies, clinics, practices use buttons or stickers. For me, it really helps set the culture of an organization when every day you're talking about someone's pronouns, that you have forms that include, pronoun identification. And it becomes, as I said, it becomes a part of the culture. So American Psychological Association, we're going to be getting into stigma and the ACEs. We, as professionals recognize how stigma, prejudice, discrimination, and violence affects the health and well-being of LGBTQ plus individuals. And it's been, as I said, a really tough 6 years when we see people actively trying to take the rights away from human beings, and that is unacceptable. That's enough for me to say on that issue. Number 6, we recognize the influence of institutional barriers on the lives of LGBTQ plus people, and we assist in developing LGBTQ positive affirmative environments. And we understand the need to promote social changes that reduces the negative effects of stigma on the health and well-being of LGBTQ individuals. So minority stress, I appreciate so much the minority stress theory in that it really does help move blame and shame on the individual to what is happening in society. With our LGBTQ plus individuals, in many marginalized communities, we see a history of, some rights being earned, and then with the stroke of a pen or a vote, rights being removed. And then we see discrimination, racism, sexism, misogyny, ethnic cleansing, however you want to identify that at. We see this sort of ebb and flow of rights being given, rights being taken. As we know, that leads to, within those marginalized communities, historical trauma. And although, LGBTQ individuals are not necessarily related to each other, there is that sense of historical trauma, that idea that our rights are going to be taken away at a moment's notice. And so there's always apprehension and a sense of impending doom and, fear that at any time our rights will be taken away. And so under the minority stress theory, we see that sexual minorities, including underrepresented gender identities, as well as queer and other sexual identities, experience distinct and chronic stressors related to their orientation and or gender identity. And because of this ongoing chronic, stress that individuals feel or experience due to discrimination, oppression, homophobia, racism, sexism, because of that, that leads to not only physical health disparities, but mental health, substance use, and a host of other impact and consequences due to that experience of that stress. And again, if we look at the intersectionality of identities, and we talk about multiple marginalized identities, LGBTQ plus individuals who are BIPOC or AAPI experience, compounded stress, compounded racism, heterosexism, transphobia, et cetera, that really leads to poorer health outcomes for those individuals. So stigma and discrimination. I don't need to say anything more about political systems, but the impact of all that, we still have people in Florida attempting to not allow school systems to teach about LGBTQ identities and what that means. The Don't Say Gay law that Ron DeSantis has passed, not allowing all human beings, all races, all identities to be represented in our educational system is definitely a form of systematic discrimination and oppression. Still today, individuals can refuse to provide services based on their religious beliefs. It was only recently that the Civil Rights Act law was passed, ensuring that discrimination could not be based on sexual orientation or gender identity. We still are fighting for equal ability in the military for our trans individuals. In adoption, LGBTQ individuals, if they attempt to go through a religious adoption, a religious-based adoption institute, they can be denied adoption. And so in addition to that, we also have to look at where do LGBTQ people learn about each other, find community, connect to other individuals. And oftentimes we have found when we look at substance use and mental health issues is in bars and clubs and other spaces that oftentimes are substances being used. Not to say that, God bless clubs and bars that have saved many individuals, because sometimes it is the thing that kept them alive until they got into treatment or received help. But we have to also understand that this can lead individuals down a path to, substance use disorders and increased mental health issues. So the impact of that discrimination and stigma can lead to increased substance use. Thankfully, today, there are so many social organizations that are available for LGBTQ plus individuals. Unfortunately, we don't find that so much in rural areas, but in some of the larger cities and metro areas, there are places for people to go to get help and support. Microaggressions, another form of an oppression or a discrimination. We look at external microaggressions, internal microaggressions, and the cumulative effects of that. And so we have micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. I'm just going to generalize with microaggressions, which really are comments, actions, behaviors, attitudes, and this can be verbal and nonverbal, that really denigrate and are harmful to people based on their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. External represents those outside microaggressions from other individuals. Internal is the impact of taking those microaggressions from society, human beings, organizations, institutions, again, sort of like that internalized homonegativity, internalizing those microaggressions. The cumulative effect leads to a sense of being less than, of being invalidated, starting to question, who you are as an individual. It also can lead to poor coping skills, including substance use and mental health issues. And as a professional, I think it's really important when we work with clients, not only LGBTQ clients, because I can tell you, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, within the LGBTQ community, we see a lot of microaggressions happen within the community towards subsets of the population. And and we also see the idea of homonormativity happening within the LGBTQ population. Part of the work that we need to do as providers, as people that serve the community, is to look at the impact of heterosexism. As we know, that really is discrimination against those that don't engage in same sex or opposite sex relationships, and anything that is not heterosexual is considered less than, invalidating, and can lead to discrimination and oppression. Cissexism is the idea, gender essentialism, that there is only male and female. Anyone that identifies outside of that gender is considered less than, often experiences oppression, discrimination based on that. So part of the work that we need to do is with clients that have identified these issues is to start helping them unpack the impact of all of these different types of experiences on them, and to help them, number one, tap into resiliency, help in resources to help them work through this. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Othering and homonormativity within the community. I use homonormativity and othering, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So within the LGBTQ plus community, we often see, and it plays out here at Pride Institute, lesbian, gays turning, discriminating, oppressing against our bisexual, trans, and gender non-binary individuals. And oftentimes what we see is if individuals are outside of the gay lesbian realm, they like to other the other subsets, the bisexual, the pansexual, the gender non-binary, and the trans individual. And so part of the work that we have to do is educating clients on what LGBTQ plus means and all the different issues within each of those subsets, but also talk about and stop how we othering and how we hurt other people when we engage in homonormativity. Yes, Christy.
10.
Okay, perfect. So here are some examples of how we other individuals. The impact is basically as minority stress. That we make people feel invalidated, they don't feel included, they don't have a sense of belonging. And oftentimes people do this, people that engage in this behavior, oftentimes, do it because they have a lot of work that they need to do about their own internal sense of self and to feel better about themselves. Not that that makes it acceptable, but the impact again is the same. We start making changes to the body and the brain. Those neural pathways start to change, especially when people are othered and discriminated and oppressed. And we start creating these negative messages about ourselves and who we are as human beings. So how do people cope with minority stress, including the use of microaggressions, et cetera? By avoidance. We saw in the statistics, people avoid going out in public. They might avoid accessing resources they need for assistance. They might start avoiding family just because it's safer, not, the fear of being discriminated, oppressed, victimized, bullied is there. So it's much easier just to avoid, living everyday life. We see people engaging in substance use. We see people with increased mental health issues, engaging in self-harm and other unhealthy coping strategies to deal with this overwhelming stress that individuals feel. Some tools and strategies is to educate our clients on minority stress and trauma. It is amazing the number of clients I have worked with that have no idea that they've experienced trauma. They will recite to you these traumatic experiences they've experienced during childhood and growing up. And to them, it was like everyday life, and not having an understanding of how those experiences have changed who they are as human, has changed their brain and their body. And so education on trauma and how trauma affects the brain. We also can help individuals identify their triggers and help them create safety plans around those triggers. Oh, when I go out in public to the doctor, I'm really worried, an example, I'm really worried that my provider is going to say something disparaging to me. So we can't always avoid the doctor, but what is a safety plan that we can create around this, this idea of having to go to the doctor, connecting individuals to resources and supports. And, one good thing about the pandemic, it helped us learn about Zoom and virtual platforms to really help those in rural areas and areas underserved to connect to resources via Zoom or other platforms. Tools and strategies, affirmations about identity. Oftentimes, LGBTQ individuals have shame about their identity. I know it's hokey and clients find it hokey, but I have to give them information on the use of affirmations. Affirmations, when used, positive affirmations, not I won't be ashamed, I'm a pansexual, I'm a proud pansexual male. Using that daily to start recircuiting and rebuilding those new branches in the brain that will help to address the trauma that the individual experiences. And then advocacy. As providers, we all need to do the advocacy work and to train clients on how to advocate for themselves. And that can be through assertive communications, helping them write letters, helping them draft, if they have an assertive communication to make to a family member or to a provider, whatever it may be, help them write that out and practice role modeling and role playing that with you. So when they leave your office, they can engage in that. And as we know, when individuals assert and advocate for themselves, they start to increase their sense of self-efficacy. Quickly, tobacco companies, alcohol companies, they love marginalized communities. They love to exploit marginalized communities. They will utilize the idea that if you use their alcohol or their tobacco brand, you will fit in, you will be part of the accepted group. Quickly, in my 20s, I lived in San Francisco. Benson and Hedges at that time used to have vendors handing out free cigarettes on the corner of San Francisco. I don't smoke anymore, but I mean, that's just how insidious marketing tobacco and alcohol tobacco companies are at marketing. Adverse childhood experiences, as we know, in 1995, 1997, Kaiser Permanente studied about 70,000 of the HMO participants and really looked at what happened in individuals' homes and the impact of that, before the age of 18. They came up with a screening or a questionnaire of 10 questions that speaks to an individual's experience of emotional abuse, neglect, physical, sexual abuse, a parent's use of substances or having mental health issues, incarcerated individuals, parents that, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Anyway, there are 10 criteria or screening questions and very basic questions, but what they found, the higher number of affirmative answers to the screening, the increased potential for experiencing trauma and or PTSD. And individuals that experience adverse childhood experiences, research has found they have experienced long-lasting effects or potential for long-lasting effects, including physical injuries, mental health issues, unintended pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies or fetal death, HIV/AIDS, cancer, diabetes, alcohol, substance use, unsafe sexual activities, and impact on ability to access education, occupation, and income. So recent research has really focused on the LGBTQ plus community. More work needs to be done to really look in depth at it, but I want to share a quick couple of studies that I was able to access. And I want you to keep in mind when we look at marginalized community, minority stress, LGBTQ individuals, with research coming out saying they've experienced more adverse childhood experiences than heterosexual individuals. Compile that together, and when you look at intersectionality of identities, so LGBTQ, perhaps an African American, and someone that has experienced adverse childhood experiences, we're talking about someone that has compounded trauma and stress in their lives. So the Journal of American Medical Association released this study. This was done of LGBTQ individuals, done in conjunction with Vanderbilt University. What was reported, 83% of LGBTQ adults experienced at least one ACE score, compared to 64% of straight adults. 52% identified experiencing 3 or more ACEs, compared to 26% of straight adults. The highest disparities were in sexual abuse, household mental illness, and emotional abuse. And regardless of the ACE score, those that participated in the study reported increased or greater numbers of mental health days, regardless of their ACE score, meaning their mental health impacted their daily quality of life and ability to engage in activities of daily living. A second study on LGBTQ youth in both the US and Canada, as you see, N was 3508. We have the breakdown of the youth by their sexual orientation and gender identity. What we see is 43% experienced at least 4 ACE scores. It was significantly higher in PANS, transgender, non-conforming, American Indian, Latinx, and rural individuals. And emotional neglect, emotional abuse, and living with family member with mental illness were the highest factors within that. Are we at 10 minutes, Christy?
Wait, we're at the end of the webinar.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I didn't want to interrupt you. And if you want to take a few minutes to wrap it up, you're more than welcome to.
Yes, anyone that would like this, again, the impact, higher mental health, higher substance use, less access to resource, higher healthcare burden and costs. That's supported in the SAMHSA study. And I'll end with this. It's absolutely imperative that every human being's freedom and human rights are respected all over the world. Johanna was the first prime minister of Iceland who identified as part of the community. And this is more important than ever. I'm so sorry. I thought I would be on time today.
That's
Thank you for hanging
okay.
in there.
I think everybody really enjoyed the webinar. You're getting a lot of thank yous in the chats. And I just want to say thank you to those of you who joined us today. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Todd and he will be happy to answer those questions. I will include his contact information in your emails. And there it is. There's his email address right there. Again, this webinar will be up on our website. And Todd, I really wish we had an additional hour because I really feel that this information that you presented us was so valuable, and it was so welcomed by us. So we appreciate your time and we appreciate your knowledge and experience, and hope that maybe you can come back and see us on another webinar in the future.
Yes, and I will shorten it down, but thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone.
Absolutely. Y'all, thank you for joining us. Information about our next webinar is coming your way soon, so stay tuned for that. And as always, we appreciate you supporting the webinar series and we appreciate you. Have a good one.
Goodbye.
Bye.